Are we live? Oh, we're live. We're live on Facebook, so if you check out A Letter to Harvey Milk's Facebook page, you'll see that we are live. We're waiting for a few more cast members, but we can start. We can start the little talk back. So, does anyone have any questions for us?
Good night.
Yes.
Oh, no, I was kidding. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, the lighting was so good. I was just wondering, is it all is it, is it all done, just routinely like on a computer? Or is someone up there going and hitting every single mark? Because it seems like you guys walk into the light, it's like, it was perfect. I just can't imagine you guys hitting the lights and having, it was beautiful.
Well, the question is about lighting, and who wants to take that?
Do we have any of our tech people here who could answer that question? Is Michelle available?
Yeah.
Hey, we have a tech question for you.
She's
like,
little.
She's like, I don't do the on stage.
Michelle is our wonderful
She's our wonderful
stage
stage
manager.
manager. So this lady had a question about the lighting cues. Are they all? Do you have to do them manually, or how does that work during the show?
So I have a book and it has all the cues written in at the specific moments, and I'm hitting the spacebar on a keyboard. That's
Manually?
yeah.
So if she presses it at the wrong time,
Things will get messed
It's
up.
all over. I've never sat in the front row anywhere for anything, and that was one of the things that just shocked me, is that the lights hit everybody, even if there were like 4 or 5 people on the stage at the same time. They were all being hit at the same time, and it was amazing.
Yeah, well, we had great designers that designed
Yeah.
plots for the show, so all that was set up during our whole tech process. So now I'm just, making them happen where they wanted them.
Wow.
Yeah,
Really good job.
We should mention too that we have an extraordinary lighting designer whose name is
Chris Ackerland.
Chris Ackerland, who won the Tony for Indecent last year for his lighting design. So
Yeah.
we are very lucky to have him.
Yeah.
okay. All right. Any next question? Don't be shy. Yes.
All over DC.
Hi.
All right.
When you are on stage and you're getting into character, what's been your inspiration for the characters that you have to play? You play them very powerfully.
Thank you. Who wants to? Adam, do you wanna?
Well, I just feel like this is one of those parts, that I think probably lives somewhere in me anyway, because I think it's really kind of the story of I feel like the DNA is something I relate to in Harry's life, and I know that my ancestors have sort of a similar track, and I do feel like I zero in on people in my family when I do this, but I don't think about it too much. But I do think that it's hardwired in me somehow. This guy, I relate to him.
Yeah, playing Harvey, of course, there's so much footage of him and his accent and his mannerisms and just his sense of humor. So it's I watched a lot of that stuff a long time ago, and it's sort of just been percolating in me because I've been working on this piece for a few years. So it's just it's becomes part of you. All right.
Well, primarily I play the lover. A lot of what I drew for her is I read a lot of queer narratives. I'm a queer woman. I think it's really important to read books that kind of tell you where you come from, that educate you on your own culture. Mostly because we don't get that growing up as queer youth. So I kind of drew from various novels that I've read for kind of my inspiration for that character. One of them is like a book that I really love. It's called Women. It's by Chloe Caldwell. There is a lesbian woman who kind of like draws this young woman out of the closet. Her name is Finn in that book, and I think I drew a lot from her. I read Tales of the City, Armistead Maupin, very important if you're thinking about this time in San Francisco, also queer narratives. Yeah, I guess Finn was probably my number one. A little bit of Eileen Miles, because how can you not? Yeah.
All right, and Cheryl Stern and Julia Neitzel. So the question was, how do you get into character? How do you get right there when you're on stage, and kind of like research? What did you do to prepare for this, or is that really your question, or did I just change that a little bit? But
I lived a lot of years with my relatives. No, I feel that I observed these women my whole life in my family, and very much so. A part of it is my mother. A part of it is who actually ran down the streets of Alexandria, Virginia, when I told her I was moving in with my Polish Catholic boyfriend, with her hands in the air going, ah! And that was in the play before I got to it. and my grandmother, and that sensibility, but I've watched them evolve over the years, and that's been for me the biggest observation in order to make this arc for Franny. I've watched my mother change a great deal from where she was at in the 80s to where she is today at 95, and so I use her as an inspiration for change is possible.
Julia?
Yeah, I am neither Jewish nor a lesbian, so I had a lot of research to do. And I read as much as I could. The short story that this play is based on was a good place to start, and in the prologue that she's written, she talks about all of the things that she read as a young lesbian woman that helped her learn about Harvey Milk. And so I kind of went down the list and bought all of those books on Amazon and read them all, and I felt like I was able to understand the LGBTQ movement in a way that I had never understood it, because I was born into a family and into a town and into a world, my small part of the world, where being gay was not different than being straight, and it was kind of shocking for me to learn as much as I did about what happened only a few short years ago. So I'm very lucky to have had to do that research.
And for myself, my grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and I'm gay and Jewish, so just like, it's not hard to get into that mindset, especially with this one. Yeah, so it's an homage to them, though. I get to play 3 of the parts, so it's really cool that I get to do every aspect of that. I mean, the Nazi is a little weird when I play that, but it's still, it's part of it and it's history. Anyone else? Another question?
I wonder, as a cast, when you guys discuss with one another, who you think that the play is really about. Because for me, walking in, I didn't know anything about the short story, but it's fascinating to me. But you think it's about Harvey Milk, but then you realize that perhaps it's more about Harry, or perhaps it's more about Barbara. That's my first question. Who do you think it's more about? And I guess it depends on who you are in the story. But also, what I loved about it, and this is just a comment for me personally, was how you have a lot of compassion for Harry and his situation, right? Because there's a lot of traumatic history. And I think that's where a lot of bigotry comes from. People don't see the other side. They don't see that people live in fear of the unknown and something that they don't understand. So I just love that this play highlighted that, because I think compassion is a big part of the conversation. And in your opinion, who do you think it is? Do you think it's Barbara or Harry? Do you think it's about their friendship?
Yeah, that's what I sort of enjoy about this, is that everybody in this world seems to be very tribal, and you sort of stay with your own. And this is a story about 2 unlikely friends, and she's young enough to be my daughter. So it's interesting to me that they become so essential to each other, and it's what makes the journey so lovely, because this one is so fantastic. It's such a great actor that I love working with her. So that would be my answer, but
Well, I think for me, one of the interesting things we talked about in rehearsal is that this is not necessarily the events as they actually happen. These are the events as Harry is telling them to Franny. And so for me, I feel like I am a player in Harry's story. And, you know, I believe that every single moment, he's a very, you know, honest person, and he has decided to tell this story, but it's also, he's in a place of stress at the beginning of the show. And I always find it fun to get to come out on stage and join that and be like, hi Adam, I love you, let's have fun. And so, for me, I feel like it's Harry's story, and I'm lucky to be a part of it, but I also think, you know, when she enters his life, it's probably the biggest change he's had in his life since Harvey entering his life not so long ago. So I think she's definitely important, but I think it's Harry's.
And Cheryl, for those of you who you might not know, she actually is one of the book writers on this piece too, along with being one of the lead actresses. So Cheryl, what's your opinion on it?
Well, it's an interesting story, and there were a lot of discussions about it. I came to the writing part of this late. I played Franny 6 years ago when this was first workshop production of it, and the lyricist passed away, which was very sad right after the production. So that's when I joined the team on the other side, and we did have discussions about focusing the story and trying to do those sort of dramaturgical things, which are, let's focus this, whose story is this? We ask this question a lot. And I think it's a story about these two lost souls who find each other via their connection for Harvey Milk. So we're always looking at the triangle and how one impacts the other. And I think that they, in any play, in any piece of literature, you're seeking to move characters from one place to another. And in this place, these characters are moved by each other, but the catalyst is certainly Harvey Milk, and the heart is what he expressed from the beginning.
I think with the show is about whoever's watching it, you know, because I think we see ourselves in art, and so and what's been really interesting about the audience's reactions to this show is, you know, I'll talk to people after the show, and it pushes different buttons for different people. You know, people will say, oh, that moment when Barbara says that she hasn't spoken to her parents in 6 years, 8 years. And, you know, that's the moment that got me, or it was the Holocaust moment, or whatever it is. It really, like, everybody has their own moment where their button gets pushed. And so I think it really is, it's about what you bring to the experience, too.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that we were able to see a queer person's perspective from different time periods. You got, you know, mid-'80s, you had Harvey Milk, you had the Holocaust, and especially today on the anniversary of the Pulse shooting. And having this story, this was an infant in 2012. How has it been different from 2012 to 2018 and all of the different time periods that we see in the musical as well?
Yeah. Well, you know, one thing that we've been saying in these talkbacks a lot is that we have found, because I've been doing this, you know, since in staged readings since like 2010 or 11, that there's never a bad time to do this show. This show touches on so many issues that it always feels relevant and timely. When we did the show in 2012, we had just gotten gay marriage in New York. So it seemed like, oh, it's the perfect timing for this show, you know? But now there's a whole bunch of other issues that it deals with. That now the show is much more about gun violence than it was in 2012. Anything else to add to that?
No, exactly, that it's resonating so differently, and yet we feel hopefully that it will always resonate on all the, you know, shoot on all the levels. But right now, pardon my pun, because we opened right during Parkland. It was so powerful, and the lyrics of if enough of us hold hands, no one can hold a gun, became so anthemic in a way that it didn't really register 6 years ago.
Who wrote that line?
Excuse
Who
me?
wrote that line?
Ellen Schwartz, the lyricist, passed away.
Yeah.
If we all hold hands, nobody can
If
hold
enough
If
of us
enough
hold
of
hands,
us hold hands,
no one can hold a
no
gun.
one can hold a gun.
That's
Yeah.
I love the production, I remember the time and history, and that's why I really wanted to see this. It was so hard, so moving back then and now. Do you have any plans to move it somewhere after the run? Because
Are there plans to move it? Is the question. Yeah. I mean,
Well, my dad thinks we should be on the bottom.
for what it's worth. You got dad's lips.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Ellen.
Your comment about the audience reacting as through their own experiences, and just a comment first and then a question. The comment is that I experienced all the lines of all of the actors. I'm about to be an octogenarian, and I've been married to a woman. I'm now married to a man. I've had lovers. I've had lovers that died in the AIDS crisis. And I experienced most of the things that you talked about and acting. So I was laughing, I was crying.
You must be exhausted.
You brought... I bounced back quickly. Your song at the end really touched me to the core, and I cried. So the question is, as actors, do you get a sense of the emotions that you are able to impart to those in the audience?
Very much so. We're so affected by the audience. Our composer came the other day on Sunday. I'm sorry, on Sunday our composer came and it was a very good audience, or was it Saturday, I don't remember. But she was like, "Oh my God, you guys, you were so great today." I said, "It wasn't us, it was the audience." She said, "But you were doing different things." I'm like, "Because the audience was so responsive." And we're in this with you, and I think that audiences often forget that, but it's such a shared experience. So we do feel when we connect we move you and we connect to you, or when you laugh, and that brings new things out of us. You know, it's that's why we do it, because we like you, because we like a live experience.
Yeah, of course, when audiences laugh, of course, that's something that audibly we can hear, but mostly we can't really see out there, So it's sometimes hard to know what's going on in people's faces. But there's one moment that I love when this happens during the concentration camp scene when the Nazi turns around and shoots Yussel. Sometimes I have to have my head sort of like down and straight, and I love it when somebody in the first row goes. It's just like, yeah.
I've lost family in concentration camps, and I went to see the camp just outside of Munich and had a direct experience of being there. And being Jewish, it just resounded, and thank you for all that you did to bring out everything in me. I owe it to my friend Matt.
Do we have time for one more? One more question. Yeah.
It really resonates with me, the whole journey that Harry's character takes. It made me think of, my father threw me out in the street because I was gay when I was 8 in 1980, and I became LGBT homeless youth in New York. And I never had that reconciliation until he ever wanted to see me again, and he never did. He died in 2013. And it just gives me a great deal of hope to watch the reconciliation in the end, because in many ways, I feel that your character is going to have that reconciliation, because it's foreshadowed to your relationship with Harry. And it just, I don't know how that was woven. It's woven in really beautifully, and it doesn't hit you over the head. It really resonates with me, and it just feels very honest. And all of you have a way of taking characters that could be like historical characters, could be caricatures. Your character is so honest, yet also over the top. The honesty that comes through, I think, is both in the writing and the beautiful performances that you do. I just wanted to say that relationship between the two of you is kind of my reconciliation with my father when I watched it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, well. All right, one more. Last one.
I just wanted to add that it's very special to me to see the intergenerational thing that continues to go on in the play. share stories in both directions.
I think what's really lovely about that is that when I first read this show and I was going to my callback, they sent me the script and I read it. I was so psyched about it, and I was like, oh, I would really love to be a part of telling this story, because I would first of all love to play a lesbian woman, and second of all, after reading it, I was like, this is a beautifully intersectional piece of theater, and I think that intersectionality is deeply lacking quite often in terms of the narratives that we are producing, because it's not quite as accessible for a primary audience and the people who can offer money to produce theater. And I was so psyched to read this and see that we are at the intersect of a Jewish lesbian narrative and however Harry identifies, and I don't think that we need to necessarily label him, or his love for his wife is so valid and so beautiful and so honest and so pure, and yet he can still have this experience that it was a part of who he was and has impacted his lifetime, and that he is that he's carried with him for his ever since. And I think it's really important to nurture those kinds of narratives, and that's why I was I'm just so grateful to be a part of this every night. And yeah, I think that that's something that if we can all take that and think about it and apply it to the kind of art that we are all trying to put out and the kind of art that we're trying to support. Those narratives that really give voice to people that are a little bit more finitely unique, then that's what I love about this play.
I love that.
Yeah.
Isn't she awesome?
On that note,
And I
yeah.
have one last thing to say. I want to say that the intergenerational relationships have completely existed off stage too. The fact that Barbara's able to learn so much from Harry, I learned so much from Adam and Cheryl every single day backstage with them, and it's so amazing to me to have this opportunity, because not only are they amazing people who've lived amazing lives, they're performers who've been performing forever and are so. Have really amazing careers, and so to get to So to get to learn from them on stage and off is a
But you
bonus
bring
for me.
something to them as
That's
well.
right.
I
A
mean,
lot.
it works both ways.
You bet.
Yeah.
And that is what the theater gives you, is that you become, we share a dressing room, so I'm great friends with girls that could easily be my daughter and maybe grandchildren.
Never.
No, but we don't feel that generational stuff. We're just close, and I learn from them every day so much, I can't tell you. And they're extraordinary people, all of them.
Woohoo.
Well, thanks so much for coming. Tell your friends, we close on the 30th, and we would love some more support in the final couple weeks that we have. Happy Pride, and stay safe.